What is up, IDP Army? Welcome to Defense Matters, where we're talking mostly IDP, all fantasy football. It's me, your host, Jordan Rains, at 50 Shades of Drunk on Twitter. Happy Thanksgiving, guys and gals. Thankful to be here. Thankful to have you listening to the show. Want to give a special shout out to my man, Steve, the producer. Appreciate you, Steve. Thankful for you. Thankful for the IDP Army. Thankful we get to watch some football today. Thankful we get to eat some mashed potatoes, some turkey, some gravy, some stuffing, all the good stuff. So I hope you all are having a good time with your families and friends and enjoying Thanksgiving, however you all choose to do that this year. I'm going to go ahead and drop some IDP rankings on y'all and some notes. And for this upcoming week 12, we got 2 games today. They pushed back my Steelers game, which pretty annoyed by that, but whatever. I'll let it go. Steelers, this is going to be a great year for us. It is a great year so far. People are still sleeping on us, and that's fine. We're going places. I'm excited. As always, subscribe, like, leave a review. Would appreciate that. I really would appreciate that. It helps the show a lot. It's like the only thing you guys can really do to help the show. That I asked you to do to help the show, and I appreciate that. I do this for you. You do that for me, and yeah, we can take this thing places. Excited for the off season too. I have a lot of cool projects. Steve and I talked about that. But anyway, we'll get to the rankings and the notes. Join me Sunday, myself and Steve, and we'll be on the the channel doing the live stream as well. We'll do a start sit show, the IDP Army live stream. So come join that 11 Eastern. We do that every Sunday. But let's go ahead and jump into some. Let's talk about the top players from week 11 real quick here. An IDP 1, 2, 3 scoring this last week. Olivia Vernon, 42 points. He was your number 1 defensive line player this past week. We got the call that Myles Garrett was going to be out with COVID. He's going to be out at week 12 as well. So Olivia Vernon, I mean, he filled in. He put up some big numbers in Myles Garrett's absence. It's sad because I have Myles Garrett on several dynasty teams, and I see these numbers by Olivia Vernon, and I'm like, man, that should have been Myles Garrett. But good for him. No Myles Garrett this week, so Olivia Vernon is pretty high in the rankings. I'll tell you that. I mean, he's still got some juice in him. So he was your number 1 defensive line player. Linebacker this week, number 1 guy was Alex Singleton. We had a lot of questions in the live stream last week about Alex Singleton. We had a really good, nice game 2 weeks ago. Had another really nice game this last week. I said, I wasn't playing him as anything more than a DB3, linebacker 3 probably. I know he had 1 hot game, but he's had 2 hot games now. I mean, he finishes the number 1 linebacker. So I don't know if Nate Gary's coming back off IR or not. He might already be back off. We'll need to check on that. So I don't know what they're going to do. Maybe they play Singleton. Maybe they give Gary a spot back. We'll have to see. But if Gary's a lot higher in the rankings, or Singleton's a lot higher in the rankings this week than last week as well. Because, I mean, 2 back-to-back high-level weeks, I mean, that's a trend. Well, it's not quite a trend, but it's pretty damn close to a trend. And then the number 1 overall defensive back last week was Jordan Fuller. And actually, he tied with Janoris Jenkins. Talked about Janoris Jenkins on the live stream Sunday morning. Said he was a guy that I would be interested in playing as cornerback this week. He came up a couple of times. Justin Reed had another nice week. Good for him. It's really good to see his name back up there again. Minka Fitzpatrick, another guy. He had a really nice week. These guys all finished right around 30 points. Jordan Fuller, though, on Monday Night Football, those 2 picks of Brady really took people over the top. I said last week when Rapp went out, he and Rapp and Fuller have been basically trading places on the IR because of injury. I brought up, they're both basically DB1s, low-end DB1s when they're on the field. And I said, I would be confident playing Fuller as a, low-end 1 this last week, high-end 2. And he ended up being the number 1 guy on the week. He actually won me a week in Shark City. So that was a pretty big matchup between myself and Big 3 IDP host, Josh Raymer. So I was pretty happy to have him on the squad this week. So that was good. He ended up, like I said, with 30 points. And then Alex Singleton, I think, had just like 32 points. So let's get to some news and some injuries. We had Jayon Brown, elbow injury. Looked pretty not great. He looked like he was in a lot of pain. They said he's dislocated and fractured his elbow, so he's done for the season. That's a real shame. He's one of the better linebackers in the league. He's one of the better linebackers for IDP. plays at all the snaps. I mean, he gets a ton of pass deflections, which you love, and then he also gets a lot of tackles. So that's a real big blow to that defense. Rashaan Evans and Harold Landry are going to have to step up big time, and then we'll have to see who they call up as the next man up. I saw there was a couple of guys that came out in that game to fill in for him. But we'll just have to see how that plays out this week. I'm not playing anybody until I see a little bit more. That's not, Jayon, or that's not Rashaan Evans or Harold Landry. Josh Allen, this knee injury, it's back. He got knocked out of a game a couple weeks ago because of a knee injury. He's hurt his knee again. They were blowing smoke on, Sunday night, Monday morning, saying, "Oh, it's not that bad. He's going to be fine." And then the next day they put him on IR. So he's gone at least 3 weeks. It's basically a wash of a season for Josh Allen. He has not performed like we wanted him to. Be that as it may, that could be the organizational, issues, the funk that the Jaguars just seem to be in overall. It's unfortunate. He's a talented player, and I expect him to come back strong next year. But his value is definitely dipping just based on what we saw this season. Given the chance to go do something, he really didn't do a lot. And then we had Ronnie Harrison. He had a knee injury for the Browns early in week 11, exited the game. He returned shortly after that, but then he exited again and just didn't come back. So what are you going to do? Every time I play Ronnie Harrison, he gets hurt. Every time I bench him, he has like a 25-point game. So if anybody else is feeling that pain, I'm right there with you. So let's go ahead and talk about some notes for the week or just on the season so far. We'll start defensive line players. Trey Hendrickson, I mean, he's the real deal. He had two sacks before the half this week. I mean, monster. I mean, that's all I gotta say. I mean, I have him in a couple of leagues. I got those points. I was kind of like, I don't want to say I was like shocked that I had him in, but it has been a tough season for injury. So I had him in a lot of IDP flex spots, it turned out. So I wasn't really feeling that. And it was a good week to have Trey Hendrickson. Last week was a huge letdown week for a lot of defensive line players. And a lot of those guys that were down last week had monster games this week. Cam Jordan, he had a bad week last week. He came back up. Montez Sweat came back up for a decent game. Chase Young had a decent game. So defensive line was a lot better this week. Yannick, even on his minimal snaps, sack and a forced fumble this week. Chase Young had that forced fumble at the goal line, which is pretty big. So I mentioned earlier, Olivia Vernon, that big game, 4 solos, 3 tackles for loss, 3 sacks, a pass deflection, a safety, an assist, 3 quarterback hits. I mean, he did everything in this game. W for the Browns too. So Browns, even though Baker's not doing much this year, the Browns are winning games. So, it's a team sport, and the team's humming along nicely. So good for them. It's good to see that. Wanted to make a note here about TJ Watt. He has as many tackles for loss through 10 games which is 14 right now as of recording this, as he had in all of 2019. So he's pacing for a monster tackle for loss season. He's gonna be pushing in on. He might push in on 30. So that would be something. That would be something special to watch happen. It was a down week for TJ Watt though this last week. He did only have 6 points. He played 53 snaps. DeForest Buckner had a down week this last week at defensive line, 7 points. He played 56 snaps. Emmanuel Ogbah down week, Joey Bosa down week. They played both in the 50s in snaps. Jeffrey Simmons, Cam Hayward. There were some pretty low end guys this week. Romeo Okwara, 3 points. Chase Winovich, 2 points. So, you expected a little bit more from some of those guys. It was honestly the first down week TJ Watt's had all season. So that was unfortunate, but he's still the number 1 defensive line player. I wanted to quickly bring up Harold Landry as well. He's having a kind of a crazy season. He's top 5 right now at defensive line if you play on Sleeper. And at linebacker, he's obviously a lot lower. But if you play in an edge or defensive line like I do, on Sleeper, he's defensive lineman 5 in IDP 1-2-3 scoring. The only guys ahead of him are Myles Garrett, Jason Pierre-Paul, Za'Darius Smith, and TJ Watt. And he's getting his points a little bit differently than them. He only has 3.5 sacks on the season, and he's up here with guys who are basically all leading the league in sacks, basically, or damn near close to it. TJ Watt, like 9. Myles Garrett has 9.5. So he's up here with some big names while only producing 3.5 sacks. And you say, how is that? Zadarius Smith, 8 sacks, Jason Pierre. I mean, these guys are all in the top 10 of sacks. And Harold Landry's not even sniffing that. But it really comes down to, one, he's playing a lot of snaps. He's playing basically essentially 90+% of snaps as an edge rushing linebacker. So he's basically like a TJ Watt type of player. He's on the field constantly. He's got 12 quarterback hits. Myles Garrett has 14. He's not too far off there. He has 7 tackles for loss. Myles Garrett has 7 tackles for loss. Not too far off there. He has, this is interesting part. He has 5 pass deflections. Myles Garrett has 0. So he's got 15 points in pass deflections, making up for these lost sacks. So when you look at his scoring breakdown, which I've been posting these on my Twitter feed, if you guys want to hop on there, if you have any questions about guys, I can post them. But Harold Landry right now has 45% of his points are coming from solo tackles. Compared that to the other top 5 guys, or 4 guys in the top 5, Myles Garrett's getting 30% of his points from solos. Jason Pierre 31, Zadarius Smith 33, and TJ Watt 28. So Harold Landry is producing a lot more solo tackles than these guys, and 2 is he is keeping up with the tackles for loss. He has 14, like I said. Myles Garrett 14. He's got more than Jason Pierre. He's only got 10, or not 10 points. So he's got 5 of them. And then Zadarius Smith and TJ Watt both have a decent bit more. But he's keeping up in that department fairly well. And then the pass deflections, like I alluded to, I mean, he's got 5 pass deflections. Zadarius Smith only has 1. Myles Garrett has 0. So, he's making up these points in other ways. So just because he's not getting a lot of sacks doesn't mean he can't be a productive defensive lineman. Look back last season at who's a good example of this last year? Sam Hubbard's a good example. He had a really high solo tackle rate, and he did other things, So you can produce on the field if you're getting the snaps and you're a playmaker. I mean, he's still getting more than almost 50. What we got here? He's still getting almost 45% of his points in impact plays. Even if you include the sack. So he's an impact player, getting behind the line of scrimmage. He's got 2 interceptions on the year too. I know that's kind of fluky, but like I said, he's kind of like a mini TJ Watt. TJ Watt's got an interception on the season. He only got 1 interception on the season. Anyway, I wanted to just highlight for a second there Harold Landry. He doesn't get enough love. You need to buy him up in Dynasty. That's just the long and short of it. I've been saying that for a while, and I kind of looked at the top 5 this last week. I was kind of shocked that he was in the top 5 at defensive line, but I knew he would be pretty high. I've had him in leagues, and he's playing very well with only 3.5 sacks. So kudos to him. Hats off. All right, linebacker notes. I said last week maybe we get the Isaiah Simmons breakout game because of Devondre Campbell injury. Devondre Campbell snaps did dip. Isaiah Simmons did play a lot more, and he had a massive game. He was the number 2 linebacker on the week. 9 solos, 2 tackles for loss, an assist, quarterback hit, and a sack. He put up 30 points. And basically his first real time they handed him the keys to the castle. So, if you've been holding on to him, rejoice. And on Sleeper, he is a very, very rare type of Konami code or whatever you call that, because he is defensive line and linebacker eligible, but he's playing a middle, like a linebacker role. So he's going to get you a lot of tackles in your defensive line position. So it's kind of like, if you're an MFL person, it's like Logan Ryan right now is a cornerback on MFL, but he's really playing safety. So you get like juiced up points, especially in these premium leagues, because of the position he plays. He's going to just by default outscore the other guys playing his spot. That's kind of what you're going to get with Isaiah Simmons. So if you have him in Sleeper, he might, we're looking at a guy who's probably going to win people championships if you put him in your defensive line spot and you're sitting there with someone like Myles Garrett or TJ Watt already. And then you don't even have to play around with the Chase Young, Chase Winovich, Cam Hayward, Joey Bosa. I hope something happens here. Like, you can just put in some points and be like, look, it's going down. So kudos to you if you have him. I am very, very ashamed to say that I have 0 Isaiah Simmons because I missed him in like all my rookie drafts, and then he didn't do ish at the beginning of the season. Like I said earlier, Alex Singleton, he looks legit. He could steal this role from Gary, but we're going to have to see when he comes back what actually happens, because this is the Eagles and nothing they do makes any sense, really. Roquan Smith, I want to bring up about him. One, he's an absolute beast, superstar stud. He and Devon White are, I mean, these boys they're bad. They're bad men. But Roquan Smith right now, he has 15 tackles for loss on the season. He has the second most. Only TJ Watt has half a tackle for loss more than him. That's insanity. Okay. So one, more than his previous 2 seasons combined. Okay. And we're only at week 12. So Roquan Smith is playing crazy lights out right now. He's on pace to basically put up a damn near identical season to what Darius Leonard put up in 2018. In 2018, Darius Leonard had 37 impact plays. Let me check this one more time. I think he had 35 impact plays and 163 tackles, if I'm not mistaken. And right now, Roquan Smith is pacing for 153 tackles. Okay, so that's a little bit less, but he's pacing for over 37 impact plays. So he's going to go over Darius Leonard in the impact plays this season, or he could. So we're going to have to see how that actually shakes out. But he's basically going to put up a monster season. Devon White, if he can just get a little bit of an edge on Devon White, he's going to hold that spot down pretty easily, I think. So it's kind of at the cost of Danny Trevathan too. He hasn't really been what you wanted him to do this season. Here it is. 37 impact plays and 154 tackle pace right now for Roquan. In 2018, Darius Leonard had 35 impact plays and 163 tackles. So I wanted to vet that. I knew I had it somewhere here for you guys. So I'm giving that to you, guys and gals. He's a top 3 linebacker in Dynasty. So, and he's probably worth a first round pick if you want context. New York Jets, this guy Harvey Lange, he could be a waiver wire target. He had 11 tackles on 76 snaps. The thing you like there is 76 snaps. The Jets are going to play bukus of snaps because they suck. So even if a guy's playing like a shared snap percentage, it's going to be just kind of by default higher. So he had a half decent game. Jets linebackers have been productive. They're kind of like Browns linebackers, where you just want one because they're going to put points up. Some letdowns this week at linebacker: Jerome Baker, Bobby Okereke, Anthony Walker, Devondre Campbell. Snaps were kind of the issue for the last 2 there. Defensive back notes. I know I'm kind of dragging on the notes today, guys, but I mean, the rankings you can check those out on the site. They're not hard to find. Commentaries, what you're probably really here for. Minka Fitzpatrick, 2 interceptions this last week. Okay, that makes I think that's his 4th on the season. When he gets hot, he's hot, And I said, somebody asked about him a week or 2 ago, and they said, do I take him out of my lineup? And I said, just leave it. At this point, you just kind of leave him in there. We saw what Mike Hilton was doing at the start of the season. Mike Hilton kind of disappeared, got hurt. Minka Fitzpatrick's kind of been coming on strong, and we know Minka Fitzpatrick's a talented all-pro type of player. And now he's getting these high leverage opportunities, and it's working out for him. So he's been on fire. He had 2 interceptions this last week. Like I said, he was a top 5 defensive back. That's why you leave him in your lineups. Never as a 1. You don't play Minka Fitzpatrick as a 1, but he can have 1 weeks. And then Terrell Edmonds this last week popped off for his second and third interception of his career, both in the same week. So you had both the Steelers safeties popping off, which was awesome to see. No one cares, but I chose to bench Terrell Edmonds for the first time in 2 leagues, and one of them it cost me. I basically played him every week this season, and I just set him for, I don't remember why. I just randomly decided he's floors. He's a floor guy, but he threw up some ceiling this last week, so good for him. That's a good trajectory for him. He's been playing a lot better, so this yeah, it was good to see him actually make some impact plays and turnovers, and big ones. So good for him. Jeremy Chin had a letdown this week. Like I said, he was another guy that kind of let you down. I bring him up in the defensive backs. He's really a linebacker at this point. But he only 4 tackles, only 6 points, so most of them were assists. And then Jamal Adams, Kari Willis, and then Buda Baker all let you down this last week. Play them. I mean, these guys are top dogs. They let you down once. I mean, you just roll them back out there this next week because they're gonna take care of your team as they have all season. So, all right, let's hop into the rankings, and then I'll get y'all out of here so you can go spend time with your family and loved ones and watch football and do all that great stuff we all love to do on Thanksgiving. So, linebackers first. Or wait, no, I always do defensive line first. All right. So, week 12 IDP rankings, defensive line players, Stephon Tuitt, Aaron Donald, Joey Bosa, Cameron Jordan, Brian Burns, Chase Young, DeMarcus Lawrence, Montez Sweat, Carlos Dunlap, Olivia Vernon, Brandon Graham, and Jason Pierre-Paul are my top 12 plays this week. Stephon Tuitt gets a really nice matchup. If you're watching on YouTube, you get to see the graphic. They get Baltimore. Yeah, Baltimore's going to be well rested now, but they're a lot of the guys that are in their COVID protocol. Why this game got moved, if you're not aware of the drama, is a lot of guys from Baltimore. There's like a COVID outbreak in Baltimore. A couple of guys got it. The running backs, you probably know that from the offensive side of things. And then it started getting out that more and more guys had it, and they were going to be announcing multiple guys were missing the game. And apparently they had 6, 7, 8 guys test positive. A lot of them were offensive linemen. And the NFL now is like, well, let's be safe, so we're going to postpone it. So maybe some of these guys will play. So the Steelers were pumped because none of their guys have COVID, and they're ready to take on Baltimore after they just came off a tough game, a tough loss in overtime, and a short week with a bunch of their players out. And now the game gets moved, so maybe there's a chance that, some of their guys are going to be able to play now, and they're going to be more well-rested. So the Steelers, who are already the best defense in the league now, and they're already in a divisional game and a rivalry game, one of the few in the NFL that I feel like is still very real, they're pissed. And so Stephon Tuitt against, Lamar Jackson, who's not playing his best football, who gets sacked a lot. I think this is going to be a money game for him. And obviously, you guys, if you're on Sleeper, TJ Watt's number 1 play, duh. But I'm talking to you guys through my Fantasy Pros rankings right now. So Stephon Tuitt, number 1. Aaron Donald gets San Francisco. He's had a couple down weeks, past couple of weeks. He's not Defensive Player of the Year. So spare me. If he blows up this week, please don't tell me he's Defensive Player of the Year. The last 2 weeks, he hasn't done shit. He's not pacing. He's pacing for one of his down years. I'm sure he's grading out well, but he's not going to lead the league in tackles for loss this season, I don't think. A middle linebacker might do that. And as I said earlier, Roquan Smith, he has 15. So he's balling out. He might be Defensive Player of the Year, honestly. Aaron Donald has 11. So, he's not too far behind, but he's still a handful behind, and these other guys are pacing very well. But he's still a top play this week. San Francisco, they have a backup quarterback, and they're kind of beat up all over the place. Their wide receiver situation, their running back situation. They're getting Mostert back, but, I don't know what kind of game shape he's going to be in coming off the IR and all that. And it's just going to be it's kind of a hodgepodge, ragtag group of guys. This isn't the team that went to the Super Bowl last year. A lot of guys might be there, but this is not that team. So the Rams defense is good. Aaron Donald's still their leader, so I expect him to have a bounce back week this week, but that's to be expected. Joey Bosa coming off the dud, he gets Buffalo. That's a good matchup for a defensive line. You can get some sacks there. And Joey Bosa had, like I said, down week, but I think he's gonna bounce back. Cameron Jordan, I got a little bit of heat last week for people saying, Cam Jordan, you have him so high in your rankings still. And I was like, look, you go with the known talent, you go with the known commodity, you go with the longest history of success. That's how I view this. That's why Aaron Donald is still a top player. Until he falls off, he's not going to, not be up here. Cameron Jordan, similar situation. I like the matchup. He had a monster week. I think he ended up being the number 2 or 3 defensive lineman. He had 2 or 3 sacks. It was just a really great week for Cameron Jordan all around. So I was happy I stuck with him. And if you played him, you were happy too. Brian Burns at 5. Another guy that breakout game finally came this last week. 2 big sacks. He ended up being a top 5 defensive lineman, top 6 defensive lineman. And I was, he's been right on the cusp of that monster game all season, and he had it. Dude's 22 years old. He's a star, I think, in the NFL, and I'm excited to have him on a lot of teams. And if you can still go get him from an owner or a manager, I recommend you do that before they get too attached, and watch him play. Chase Young, Dallas. I mean, there's nothing else to say about that. That's going to be a good game today. DeMarcus Lawrence, that's the same game. Montez Sweat, same game. So that's just going to be, I think that's going to be a defensive game. They're both running out kind of some backup quarterbacks that both used to be starting quarterbacks in the NFL. Like, they still are now, but, we know what Alex Smith is. We know what Andy Dalton is. This will be a good game, but I think they'll both take a couple sacks. Carlos Dunlap, he has had 2 top 5 finishes in the past 3 weeks. His first week with Seattle, and then this last week, both those weeks he was top 5 at defensive line position. He had not finished in the top 10 at defensive line all season. Going back to last year, week 17, which you don't play fantasy football in week 17, he was the number 1 guy, but this year he had not been in the top 10. He's been top 5 twice since going to Seattle. So Carlos Dunlap, play him every week. He's got a juicy schedule coming up. He's got Philadelphia. I mean, he's got a great schedule. He's kind of in that same vein with Isaiah Simmons. I think that Carlos Dunlap's going to be on a lot of championship winning rosters for IDP Fantasy Football. I'll say it this way: if I'm playing in the championship week, and I don't have a lot of Carlos Dunlap, I'm ashamed to say that, but I don't. And if I'm playing against a guy who has Carlos Dunlap, I'm going to be worried. No matter who I have in my lineup, Joey Bosa, Cameron Jordan, Brian Burns, these guys I have ranked ahead of him right down this weekly, I'm going to be concerned. So that's where I'm at with Carlos Dunlap. I think he's going to be a league winner. Olivia Vernon this week, Myles Garrett still out. He gets Jacksonville, another backup quarterback situation, a backup quarterback situation. So he's going to feast again. We saw what he did, took advantage this last week. I expect the same thing. Brandon Graham having a great season. He gets Seattle this week. Plug him in. And then Jason Pierre-Paul, he's not quite as high as usual because Kansas City doesn't give up a lot of sacks. He's still JPP, though. We saw what he did this last week. He can get interceptions. He had interception in back-to-back weeks, which is very rare for a defensive lineman. He's got 2 on the season. He's a top 5 defensive lineman on the year right now. He's number 3, only behind TJ Watt and Jaylen Smith. That's right. He has more fantasy points right now than Myles Garrett. So, I mean, it is what it is. My man, I was in a league this year. I saw a guy drop him at the end of the season, or in the middle of the season, in the off season, and I had a buddy pick him up, and he's like, I can't believe that guy did that. And I'm like, I know. Like, good for you, though. I mean, you got a top 3 player at a certain position now, just because somebody was like, oh, he's old. Man, there ain't nothing old and busted about JPP. Believe that. So that's my top 12 for you at defensive line. Let's run over to the linebackers. Make this kind of quick and painless for you. Darius Leonard's the undisputed number 1 as per usual. He's an impact player. He's a high tackle guy. He gets Tennessee, which is a pretty friendly matchup for linebackers. Bobby Wagner is number 2. Not necessarily the greatest matchup for linebackers, but he's still Bobby Wagner, and he, Philadelphia is gonna. There's a high turnover kind of situation in Philadelphia right now. We know Carson Wentz throws interceptions. He leads the league in interceptions. He leads the league in sacks. He leads the leagues in force and fumbles. So he's like the most turnover-prone human in the NFL. Bobby Wagner has been playing some good football this year. He has a couple of turnovers, a couple of sacks. He's got 3 sacks on the season. No interceptions, no forced fumbles, but he's got 5 pass deflections. So he gets his hands on the ball and he gets his hands on the quarterback. So this is a good situation for Bobby Wagner. I like his odds to get home on this. Roquan Smith, he's down a little bit this week. Well, he's not really. I mean, he's still top 3. Not a super duper matchup necessarily for linebacker position against Green Bay. They're 4th against the linebackers. So, but I still expect him to produce. Aaron Jones, they can be a little bit run heavy at times. So that could be good for him, especially if they get up early on this defense and they start running out, that whole 4th quarter, they just hand it off to Jamal Adams, and maybe they even play some A.J. Dillon. Blake Martinez, this is a pretty good, traditionally, game for linebackers against the Cincinnati Bengals. They play a lot of snaps, run a lot of plays, but this is the first week without Joe Burrow, so I don't know if this offense is going to hum along that way, but it's Blake Martinez. I still think you're going to be good for 15 plus points out of him. You know, your hands tied behind your back and your eyes blindfolded. Like, he's just going to do it. Jaylen Smith, this is a game today. So hopefully you are playing Jaylen Smith. You're going to want this action. I mean, Jaylen Smith, you play him every week. This is a divisional game. And it's a good matchup for linebackers. A couple of guys that are a little bit lower this week on the rankings than usual. Well, I'll just read off the rest of them too. At 6, we got Miles Jack. 7, Foyesade Olakun. 8, Devon White. 9, Levante David. 10, Eric Kendricks. 11, Jordan Hicks. And 12, Joe Schobert. Devon White and Levante David, I just quickly wanted to say that, they're a little lower this week than normal. They've been this low before, and you're like, oh, I know. I'm like, oh, they're still top 10. Like, low is a very relative term, but for them, you might be like, oh, Jordan, why are you burying Devon White at 8? The reason for that is, the Chiefs, they're the worst matchup essentially for linebackers in the NFL right now. They just do not give up a lot of points to linebackers. That probably has a lot to do with the fact that they just throw on people. If you're a Clyde Edwards-Helaire manager, or this. I mean, you're very well aware of the fact that these running backs aren't. This isn't a very run-heavy team. This Chiefs team. So everything kind of going outside and deep, and that leaves the linebackers kind of wondering what the WTF. So. Devon White, Levante David are a little bit lower, but I'm still leaving them in my top 10 because they're Levante David and Devon White. They're true playmakers at the linebacker position. They can both get behind the line of scrimmage almost at will, if their number gets called, and they both have great tackle floors. I mean, Devon White right now, 53% of his points are coming from solo tackles. Levante David, 59%. So they're impact players, but they're still getting a healthy number of points from their, from their impact, from their baseline, which is their tackle floor. Like I said, both get behind the line of scrimmage a lot. Both have 9 tackles for loss for Devon White on the season. Levante David has 7. So. And they're getting sacks. Devon White's like basically the most effective pass rushing linebacker in the league right now. He's got 30 points in sacks. So he's got 5 on the season. So he's pacing for a monster season too. I mean, like I said, he's right there with Roquan Smith. It'll be interesting to see how they finish out this season, and then how that's going to stack up to 2018 Darius Leonard, who is kind of the recent standard for that elite linebacker season. So like I said, I wanted to highlight them, though they are a little bit lower. I think the last couple of weeks they've been both in the top 5, but it's just that Kansas City matchup. Kendricks is having a great season. He's got a couple interceptions on the year. I post something on my Twitter. You gotta go check that out. It's just a little tiny IDP breakdown of Eric Wilson and Eric Kendricks. It's a tale of two Erics. They both play linebacker position for Minnesota, and they both have within 1 point or like 5 points of each other in IDP 1, 2, 3 scoring. One's linebacker 7 on the season, and one's linebacker 8 on the season, I believe. But their scoring profiles are different in a lot of ways, and that's something I like to look at when I'm researching my players, and kind of understanding how players play and how they score is important for IDP, because it's not just a yards and touchdowns metric situation. Like, it's a, behind the line of scrimmage, coverage, it's tackles, it's how's your defense performing just in general. Like, are they a bad defense? Are they letting a lot of plays get run on them? So stuff like that. And then understanding what kind of player you have. Are you I call them bread and butter linebacker, which bread and butter linebackers are guys that basically get 65% of their points on tackles. And a good example of a guy like that is Zach Cunningham. And if you go look at Eric Kendricks' player profile this season, he's similar to that too. 66% of his points are coming in the solo tackle department. But it's interesting. Roquan Smith looks like a bread and butter linebacker, but that's because he gets so many tackles, but he also gets massive amounts of impact plays, even though it's a smaller part of his pie overall. What he's getting on the season, it still is accumulating a ton of points for him. So he's, like I said, he's just pacing for a crazy good season. Jordan Hicks, I don't know if Isaiah Simmons playing with his hair on fire is going to hurt him. But I still trust Jordan Hicks. I mean, we're so quick to forget Jordan Hicks was the number 1 overall linebacker last season. He's not playing bad this year. He's putting up some good numbers. Not the crazy good numbers he was last year, but I think, some of that came with the disruption that Chandler Jones was bringing to that defense, and he was definitely eating in on some of those impact plays happening around him. Maybe not happening quite as often. I know Hassan Reddick is coming, having a lot of a good sacks, but Chandler Jones led the league in forced fumbles last year. So like when I say, impact plays and disruptive plays and turnover worthy plays, I mean, that's what I'm talking about. Like when you can get 1 or 2 even of those extra on the season, it really does, a good bit to kind of boost your overall score. Especially when those are scaled appropriately, those can be worth, 3 or 4 tackles, depending on if it's a solo or an assist. So, all those things matter a lot. And then Joe Schobert, he came back kind of flying out of nowhere this last week, had a 13 tackle game, one of the better game of the season. He has already said publicly that he's very excited for this game against his old team this week against the Browns. He said he's very excited to get his hands around Nick Chubb and hit him. I think he said that, and it's a fun thing to say to about a guy you used to play with. It's gonna be a fun matchup, though. I think he's gonna put a little bit extra oomph into it. So I'm expecting at least a top 15 game out of Schobert, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if he finished in the top 12 against that very run-heavy attack by the Browns. So we will jump into the defensive backs, and then I'll get you all out of here. Buda Baker, number 1. I feel like I'm on repeat every week with this. Buda Baker, Jamal Adams, Jeremy Chinn, 1, 2, 3, and 4. I mean, almost even 2. I mean, Jordan Poyer. I'm not overly, with some of these guys, you can mess around with matchups and move them around, but it's talent. Talent, production, known commodities, and Jeremy Chinn had a down week. I'm not moving. All 3 of those top guys had down weeks. I'm not moving them down. We know they have top 3, top 5 upside on a weekly basis. Jordan Poyer, same thing. He's the number 1 overall defensive back right now in the league. So I'm not moving him down. He's coming off the bye week, so don't be quick to forget. Jesse Bates having another great season, which is really good to see. I don't have him on any of my dynasty teams, but I know a lot of people have been getting Jesse Bates on their teams this past couple of years, and he's panning out really well. I love he kind of does everything. He gets the high tackles, he gets the pass deflections. He's like a souped up version of Justin Simmons. Gets the the Giants this week, so I like that. It could be a turnover game for him. Jabril Peppers gets Cincinnati. He's like I said, he's had 3 or 4 back-to-back games with top play. I think he went into the bye week this last week, so he had 3 games with 20 points, or 4 games with 20 points for the last 4 weeks. So he's been coming on strong after a slow start to the season. Justin Simmons, he's got New Orleans. That's a DB-friendly matchup. I don't know traditionally, I don't know what's going to happen necessarily with old Taysom Hill. I don't know, John Payton, he's a mastermind, so I don't know what this game's really going to look like. But Justin Simmons is always a guy that you need to have in your lineup because of the big playability. Jordan Fuller, same thing. Like I said, he's going to be a low-end DB1 probably the rest of the way. He's shown himself this last week to be a playmaker, and we saw earlier in the season he can put up some points. So good for him. And honestly, he's kind of supplanted. He and Taylor Rapp have kind of supplanted John Johnson for that playmaking safety on that team. John Johnson's just ho-humming too much for me this year. Cameron Curl, he's up there this week. He's had 2 really, really big weeks. He had another good week this last week. He gets Dallas, which is a super friendly matchup. And again, he's putting up a lot of tackles, and he's kind of making some plays. So against a kind of a battered, dejected team in the Cowboys, I could see him making a play. So Chuck Clark, I love Chuck Clark. He's had a great season. I mean, he plays Pittsburgh. Again, this is going to be a grimy game, I think, between the Steelers and Baltimore. And the Steelers defense and these are both defensive games or teams too. Steelers have the luxury of also being an offensive team, but I think the defense is going to have to do a lot of heavy lifting in this game. There are turnover prone players on the Steelers team, Big Ben included. He likes to air it out if they get up a little early. Connor, he's been known to fumble every now and again. So I could see this game. I could see a turnover or 2 for these defensive backs for the Baltimore Ravens, who all have a lot of forced fumbles on the season. So I really like Clark's chances this upcoming week to have a big game. Harrison Smith, he's put his name back in that conversation. He's had a couple of down weeks early in the season. It was kind of hard to trust him, but he's still the same Harrison Smith. I mean, you've seen that over the past couple of weeks. He's still the same Harrison Smith. He's just not having the rate of high level games that he has had over the past few years. But he's still a top play every week. He's a guy you should feel confident playing every week. And then Malcolm Jenkins against Denver this week. Jenkins is doing his usual stuff. He's playing some good football. I think this team is going to be a little bit more defensive minded going forward. Their defense might see a little bit of a boost in snaps. We saw this last week. Alvin Kamara did not catch a single pass, or did he just catch one, I believe? So we know this offense is moving at a different clip than it is used to moving at. So that might skew things a little bit more towards the defense. So I like Malcolm Jenkins. It's a Denver matchup. I mean, Drew Lock, accuracy issues, weapons issues. They might open up this defense a little bit just because it's on the field a little bit more. And I could see Malcolm Jenkins making a play this week. He's a wily veteran, and Drew Lock is. Drew Lock's Drew Lock. I love me some Drew Lock, but he still is what he is. So that is all from me today, IDP Army. Y'all, I appreciate you. I'm thankful for you. I would be thankful to you if you went and left a review for the show on Apple iTunes. Make sure you subscribe, share, tell everybody about the show. Defense does matter. Got a show coming out on the Dynasty Nerds YouTube channel. That's next week. Subscribe to the YouTube channel as well. Steve and I want to get it up to 1,000 people. That's like our kind of first little goal. So that would be cool if you guys did that. I'm sure Steve would appreciate that too. He's been putting in a lot of work behind the scenes over there. And yeah, IDP Army, go out week 12. Woo, boy. Week 12. Go kick some ass. We got one more week till playoffs, or one more week till we got that last week to playoffs. So hopefully you can solidify yourself, get that little asterisk by your name in your sleeper league, so you're locked into the playoffs. I hope that for you. It starts today. Week 12 starts this week. Go out there, kick some ass, IDP Army. Tell them who sent you.